I found out about today's case after watching an episode of Mad Men. In this episode, they talk about this crime, this brutal, horrific crime, and I had no idea what they were talking about, or that a crime this sick even took place in the 60s. This crime would shock the nation and remain one of the most infamous mass murders in American history. This case is quite violent and graphic with the topic of sexual assault, so viewer discretion is advised. Hi guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Zara, and on this channel, we talk about true crime. So if you're interested, please join the fam and hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button too, it really helps out the channel. And also share the video if you like, guys. I wanted to jump in and thank Raycon for sponsoring today's video. You guys have no idea how excited I am because I have been wanting to try these earbuds for ages. First of all, the price is right. Secondly, they are designed to fit the widest range of ears, and if you're not satisfied, they offer a 30-day happiness guarantee and free returns. But you're gonna love them because they are perfect for work, the gym, or just daily phone calls. Their latest model is better than ever with premium audio, wireless charging, water-resistant, 32-hour battery life, and my favorite is the multi-point connectivity that lets you pair with 2 devices at once. These also come with active noise cancellation, which honestly, guys, is usually hard to find at an affordable price point. I love the more streamlined design. The case is wider and longer, so it fits more comfortably in your hand, and it also has a slight grip, so it doesn't feel like it's gonna slip out of your hand. Now, one of my favorite features is the actual fit. I think I have really small ear canals, so I can actually switch out the gel tips to find my best fit. And I'm using the smallest size, so these don't hurt my ears, they're super comfortable, and they don't fall out. So go to buyraycon.com/ZaraV to get up to 20% off site-wide. Yep, you'll get up to 20% off everything on Raycon's website, including 20% off all headphones during this special deal when you go to buyraycon.com/ZaraV. Let's get back into today's case, and thank you to Raycon and you guys for all your support. On July 14th, 1966, it was a blazing hot summer's day, but it began like any other day for the staff at South Chicago Community Hospital. Nurses went about their duties, some were on the phone with colleagues, others were walking home after a night shift, and one of them was a nurse named Teresa who was now getting anxious because she had been trying to reach one of her friends at the townhouse for a long time, but no one was answering the phone. Although it was very early in the morning, it was unlike the women to not pick up, especially given that there were so many of them living in the home that at least one of them would usually answer. Teresa had known the group of nurses well. Many of them were close friends, and she could sense something was wrong. This townhouse was located at 2319 East 100th Street in Chicago and served as shared housing for 8 foreign and local nurses who worked together at the South Chicago Community Hospital. This group of women were tight-knit, living together and working long shifts together at the hospital. Let's go through each of the women. Merlita Gargulo was born on September 1st, 1942, 23 years old at the time, and was originally from the Philippines. Valentina Pasiona was born on February 14th, 1942, 24 years old at the time and also from the Philippines, specifically from the area of Cagayan Valley. Corazon Amaral was 23 years old and also from the Philippines. Patricia Ann Matusek was born on December 8th, 1945, 20 years old at the time, and originally from Cook County, Illinois. Pamela Lee Wilkening was born on August 2nd, 1945, 20 years old and also from Cook County, Illinois. Nina Jo Schmale was born on December 27th, 1941, 24 years old from DuPage County, Illinois. Suzanne Bridget Farris was born on September 10th, 1944, 21 years old and from Cook County, Illinois. Gloria Jean Davey was born on July 13th, 1944, 22 years old and from Cook County, Illinois. And lastly, Mary Ann Jordan was born on October 4th, 1945, 20 years old and still lived at home. She didn't actually live with these 8 women, but was sleeping over on this night. The home had a shared living space where the women would come together to rest and recharge after grueling days and nights of nursing sick patients. Like I mentioned, the women were all in their early 20s in various stages of their careers, and they formed close friendships. They relied on each other at times during the challenges of training and the demanding work of nursing. The nurses from the Philippines would be particularly close, sharing their feelings of being homesick. They would cook food from home like pancit, adobo, sinigang, and talk about their plans for the future. On the night of 13th July 1966, another nurse named Luisa Silvera, together with Valentina, were at the townhouse painting each other's nails after coming off a 7-hour shift at the hospital. They planned a sleepover that night, and Valentina cooked them pancit for dinner, which is a noodle dish with meat and vegetables, and Valentina and Luisa, together with the other two Filipina nurses, Corazon and Merlita, all had dinner together. Luisa then remembered she had received a few letters from her boyfriend back home that she never responded to. So she decided to just go back home after dinner, write a reply letter to her boyfriend, then grab her things and return back to the townhouse to spend the night with Valentina. When Luisa arrived home, she got a call from the hospital asking her to work a shift the following day, which was initially supposed to be her day off. By this point, it was late in the night, so Luisa decided to go to the townhouse personally to tell Valentina she wouldn't be sleeping over. She didn't want to make the phone call and wake the other nurses. So Luisa walks on over to the townhouse and she rang the doorbell, but there was no answer. So she waited a while and then went to the back door, rang that bell, no answer. So she went back to the front door and rang the bell one last time. But after no answer, she decided to just leave. Little did Luisa know that she had just escaped death 3 times in that moment. She had no idea that inside the townhouse was a monster let loose, committing the most horrific murders that would be exposed in just a few hours. Earlier that night at around 11 p.m., a window in the townhouse was broken and a man crawled in and made his way to each bedroom. He knocked on the first door. It was Corazon, Merlita, and Valentina's bedroom. Corazon was asleep and Merlita was saying her nightly prayers when she heard the soft knocks on their door. Corazon woke up to open the door and was confronted by a tall man dressed in all black. The man raised a gun and pushed Corazon into the bedroom and demanded to know where the other nurses were. Nobody said anything, they were too afraid. So the man put the gun in Corazon's back and forced all 3 women to walk out of their bedroom. Following behind, he led them to the master bedroom at the end of the hallway and turned on the light. Patricia, Pamela, and Nina were sleeping in this room. As the 3 women began to wake up slowly, they were shocked at the presence of this intruder, and all 6 women began crying. The man then tied up all 6 women's wrists behind their backs with strips of cloth he tore from their bed sheets, telling them he wouldn't hurt them. He was only there for money. He just wanted enough to get himself to New Orleans. He made the women hand over their purses and whatever little cash they had on them. The women consoled each other and told each other to trust the man, to stay calm and quiet, and he would stay calm too. As this was happening, the man froze when he heard footsteps coming up the stairs. It was Gloria. She had just returned home from a date with her fiancé. Gloria's parents didn't live far. I believe they lived just down the road. So before coming up the stairs, she made a phone call to her parents, letting them know she was home safe. When she walked into the master bedroom, he burst out of the room and grabbed her. He threw Gloria to the floor and bound her with the rest of the women. He grabbed Pamela and took her into an empty bedroom where he prepared to rape her. Suddenly, he heard the front door open once again. This time, both Marianne and Suzanne came home. Like I mentioned before, Marianne didn't live in the home. However, Suzanne was marrying her brother. And that night, Marianne wanted to spend the night with her sister-in-law. Like he did with Gloria, as the 2 women approached the master bedroom, he confronted them, knife and gun in hand. They screamed and tried to run, but he forced them into the room with Pamela. He didn't keep his promise that he only wanted their money. Instead, the man led each woman out of the room one by one, where he would either stab or strangle them to death. Suzanne and Marianne were first, then Pamela. He would wait almost 30 minutes in between each round, taking one girl at a time. As each girl was let out, they didn't make a single sound, but the women that remained tied together in the large bedroom would eventually hear their muffled cries from outside soon after. At one point, while this man was gone, Corazon quickly rolled under one of the beds in the room. She was terrified, but she stayed still and didn't make a sound. It seems like the man either lost track of the amount of women he was holding captive. Or got distracted by the women coming home, or the amount of times the doorbell rang. Remember Luisa? She had first rang the bell at the front door, but just when the man walked down the stairs, approached the front door, Luisa had already made her way to the back door. When the back door rang and the man then goes to the back door to answer it, Luisa then went back to the front door again. This made this man extremely frustrated, and he gave up on confronting the person ringing the bell. He just went back upstairs instead, hoping this person would just leave. And she did. Luisa narrowly escaped being the next victim. Gloria was the only woman believed to have been raped before being strangled. At about 3 a.m., after this man got his dose of violence for the night, murdering 8 women and raping 1, he went throughout the house and tried to steal every last dollar he could find before he walked back down the stairs and left the townhouse. Meanwhile, under the bed lay Corazon. She heard the man leave, but she was frozen, shaking and crying from the trauma, the realization that she could be laying lifeless right now, the same as her 8 friends. Finally, at around 5:30 a.m., when the sun began to rise, Corazon worked up the courage to pull herself out from under the bed. She then left the bedroom and saw the dead bodies of her friends in the other bedrooms. Corazon, obviously terrified, opened a window on the second floor and crawled out onto the ledge. Then, screaming in both English and Tagalog, she screamed, "They are all dead. My friends are all dead. Oh God, I'm the only one alive." She continued screaming until the police arrived. Corazon was able to give a description of the man to the police. He was a white male in his mid-20s, 6 feet tall. He had brown crew-cut hair, and that he had spoken to her during the ordeal. She heard his voice. She also gave a description of a tattoo she had seen on his arm, which said, "Born to Raise Hell," on his forearm. The police searched the house and found a sweat-soaked t-shirt, but fingerprints found on a purse, a glass of water, door, and a dinner plate would be crucial to finding this killer. Gloria Davy lay face down on a downstairs couch, fully nude, strangled, and mutilated. Suzanne Farris was stabbed 9 times and strangled, left in a second-floor bathroom. Mary Ann Jordan was stabbed 5 times, including 1 wound in the left eye and 1 in the heart. She was left in the front bedroom. Patricia Matusek lay next to her, strangled with her wrists bound, and next to her was Pamela Wilkening, also bound by the wrists, who was stabbed in the heart. Nina Schmel was bound at the wrists, gagged, stabbed 4 times in the neck, and also strangled. She was found in the second front bedroom together with Merlita Gargulo, whose wrists and ankles were bound, stabbed 6 inches deep in the side of her neck. Valentina Pashona was next to them with her wrists bound, stabbed 4 times, and strangled. Totally, the killer inflicted 24 stab wounds. A few days later, on 17th July 1966, a man was rushed into hospital. The man was covered in blood and had tried to end his life with a broken wine bottle by cutting his wrists. As the doctors worked to save his life, they saw a tattoo on this man, a tattoo that said, "Born to Raise Hell." The doctors recognized this tattoo from the newspaper. It was plastered everywhere. The doctor asked the man his name. The man was still in shock. He was drunk and delirious, and he just casually said, "Richard Speck." Richard Benjamin Speck was born on December 6, 1941 in Kirkwood, Illinois, to Benjamin and Mary Speck. He was the seventh child of 8 children and born into a low-income family with his early life filled with instability. His father was an alcoholic, and when Richard was 6 years old, his father died of a heart attack. His mother remarried and he struggled in school, and he had a history of misbehavior, demonstrating signs of violent tendencies even at a young age. As a teenager, he was involved in several run-ins with the law, including underage drinking, theft, and petty crime. In July 1963, at the age of 21, he was convicted of forging a signature on a stolen check and for robbing a grocery store with it. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison, but was released after 16 months, then came back to prison a week later on charges of aggravated assault and a parole violation. Richard's behavior became increasingly erratic, and by the time he was 24 years old, he had developed a reputation for being volatile and dangerous. He was a heavy drinker, and his violent outbursts and criminal activities kept just escalating over the years. He was clearly a deeply troubled individual and would soon descend into a full-blown criminal and commit a heinous act. In 1966, he robbed and raped a 65-year-old woman, and he is believed to have beaten another woman to death. When he was being questioned about these crimes, he fled from Dallas to Chicago to live with his older sister and her husband. His brother-in-law got him a job as an apprentice seaman, but after only a short while without work, he went on a murderous crime spree. On that day, July 13th, 1966, he started out the day by just sexually assaulting and robbing a 53-year-old woman named Ella Mae Hooper. He met her at a bar. He tried to make a move on her, but when she rejected him, he threatened her with a knife and forced her to come back to his motel room where he assaulted her. He then stole her gun and went to another bar to keep drinking. He then went back to his motel to collect his hunting knife and changed into all black clothing. At 11 p.m., he broke into the nurse's townhouse and committed these 8 horrific murders. It is believed that Richard had known that 8 nursing students lived here. He had been watching them from a playground behind the apartment where men would often sit at night. Once he was done with his rampage, he threw the bloody hunting knife into the river and just went back to his motel. He lay down comfortably on his pillow and went to sleep. The next day, the murders were all over the news. No, it was front page news. It was the crime of the century. Police at this point already had spoken to people all over town, and people had either seen or spoken to a man who fit the killer's description, Richard's description. Another key identifier was his southern drawl. He was very memorable to people that spoke to him. Richard woke up on July 14th without a care in the world and just began drinking, as usual. He kept his distance from the police, but knew they were closing in on him. 3 days later, with no money, no place to go, there was only one way out. So on July 16th, he checked into a cheap motel in Skid Row and cut his wrists open with a broken wine bottle. He was only found a few hours later and taken to the hospital, but before he could finish being treated for his wounds, Richard was handcuffed and sent to jail. His trial began on April 3rd, 1967. The defense tried to claim that Richard had suffered a lot as a child. He suffered a lot of head injuries. When he was 3 months old, he had pneumonia, which led his brain into being starved of oxygen, and he had to spend a month in an oxygen tent. That his drinking and drug use mixed with his irreparable brain damage caused violence, which led him to not being responsible for his actions. He was high on drugs and drunk at the time of the attacks. He had no memory of ever committing these crimes. His exact motive was unclear, but one theory suggested that Richard's violence was driven by a combination of frustration and hatred towards women, which may have been aggravated by his troubled upbringing, his mother remarrying another man, and his struggles with addiction. Another theory suggests that Richard had a deep-seated psychological need to assert dominance and control over his victims. The fact that he went home after drinking that night, grabbed another weapon after already stealing a gun from his first victim, then changed into all black clothing and picked a location and victims he was most likely familiar with, then systematically killed 8 women in a confined space, suggests that the murders were not really random, but rather very premeditated and fueled by a desire for power and domination. His brutal treatment of the victims also suggests that he had this deep hatred for women, although, this is all just theories and thoughts. Despite being incredibly traumatized, Corazon, with her head held high, testified against Richard and identified him as being the man who killed all 8 of her friends. After a 2-week trial and less than an hour of jury deliberations, Richard Speck was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to death. Richard spent 6 years on death row, but in 1972, the death penalty was made illegal by the Supreme Court, so he was resentenced to serve 8 consecutive sentences of 50 to 150 years. He finally gave his first interview in 1978 after more than a decade behind bars and admitted to killing the nurses and that he was sorry, but he didn't know why he did it. He blamed his entire life on his abusive childhood and said parents who are raising young kids need to be careful raising them because anyone can end up like him. Another decade later, when he was re-interviewed in regards to his reason for committing those 8 murders that night, he just said, it just wasn't their night. His time in prison wasn't any better with his violent behavior and further criminal activity, including drug use. And despite his notoriety, he lived a relatively quiet life in prison until his death from a heart attack on December 5th, 1991. The story of Richard Speck is one of extreme violence, tragic loss, and the lasting effects of a disturbed and very dangerous individual. His crimes shocked the nation and left a permanent scar on the victims' families and the nursing community. Richard's early life, resulting in his criminal behavior, eventually set the stage for his brutal actions. Thank goodness he served life in prison, as we know what he could be capable of if he was set free. He will forever be known for committing one of the most infamous mass murders in US history, which forever altered the lives of many. I just picture what those women must have felt in that home, the terror, but also the uncertainty. I read that after committing each murder, he would go and clean himself up, wash his hands, so that when he would re-enter the room where the nurses were being held captive, he didn't have any blood on him or he didn't look messed up. So the next woman would have no idea what her fate would be. I mean, if that's not cruel and calculated, I mean, what is? The only solace for each of those women is the fact that they each had each other in those last moments. How fortunate, I guess, I don't even know if that's the right word for Corazon, but her quick thinking to roll under that bed, hide from him, and all the other distractions that night definitely saved her life. And at first I thought she just kind of like rolled under one bed and hid there, but from what I read, I think she rolled under one bed and then when he would leave the room, she would roll under another one to kind of like get further and further away from him. And I was just thinking, another thing that I never saw discussed was I'm sure some of those women that were left in the room when she rolled under the bed saw that she had rolled under the bed. And they didn't take the risk and do the same because if they did, and Richard definitely would have noticed, 2 women missing, maybe they would have been caught. And they also didn't like rat her out to save their own lives. Not that it would have saved their lives in any way, but do you know what I mean? Like they stayed quiet. They could have very easily been like, she's under the bed, like let me go or something, you know what I mean? But they didn't. That shows me that they were all truly friends and they were hoping someone, like Corazon could either get out alive or get help. I hope that Corazon was able to live a somewhat normal life, knowing that that monster was behind bars, but it would still just be terrifying living each day knowing that this person that did this to your friends was still alive. What do you guys think about this case? I'm surprised I've never seen it pop up anywhere. I mean, all I do is true crime research, and I'm surprised I've never seen this case pop up. And literally watching an episode of Mad Men, they were talking about the nurse murders in Chicago, and I was like, what is this case about? So it's crazy to know that this even happened, that someone could even do something like this. And sadly, it's getting less and less crazy because, I mean, we all know that people are the biggest problem on this earth. Let me know your thoughts down below, guys. I can't wait to chat in the comments, and I will see you in next week's video. Besitos. Bye.